התחלה שיעור שני.
This is the last year in our Sidra on Eretz Yisrael. Okay, we don't know what we'll discuss next year, but we'll see. Okay, every year has its own stories. So we spoke basically three shiurim about the concept of the Ramban and all other commentators, and the one we missed out was the Rambam. We never mentioned him really in our whole thesis regarding Eretz Yisrael. And that's what I want to discuss today. Now, there are a lot of people and a lot of rabbis through generations had problems with the Rambam because he never considered it in the 613 mitzvahs. Okay? For different reasons, and I'm not going into that. Okay, because that his conceptual ideas of what is considered a mitzvah in the 630 mitzvahs and what isn't is a thesis on its own. He wrote a whole book on it. He created 14 principles which guided him what is considered a mitzvah and what isn't. The Ramban argued with him, etc., etc., etc. And that's why when we speak about the Rambam and his conceptual ideas regarding mitzvahs, that's a thesis on its own. What did he think? What were his perspectives? Now, one of the things which the Rambam quotes, and a lot of his ideas which he spoke about Eretz Yisrael are mentioned in Hilchot Melachim. Now, to give us an insight of how the Rambam categorized mitzvahs, categorized halacha, okay, Jewish law. What did he do? Now, he's the first person, in actual fact, after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who recreated halacha. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote the Mishnah, categorized halacha in 6 sections. Okay, Zra'im, Moed, Nashim, Zikim, Kodshim, Ta'arot, the laws of Eretz Yisrael, the laws of Moadim, the laws of marriage and divorce, the laws of damages, the laws of Beis HaMikdash, the laws of Taharot. 6 sections in which he broke down that into different Masechtot. Okay, Brochus, Peah, Shvis, etc., etc. He broke down halacha in a different way. The Rambam recreated halacha not in 6 books, but in 14 books. 14. Yad HaChazakah. That's why he called it Yad HaChazakah. 14 books. He recategorized halacha into 14 books. Okay, we weren't going to go through of them. Okay, they are Mada, Ahava, Zmanim, Noshim, etc., etc., etc. The 14th one is called Sefer Shoftim, the book of Judges, where there he speaks about laws of law courts, laws of witnesses, Edut, the laws of those who rebel against the Sanhedrin, which he called Hilchot Mamrim, where there he creates the foundations of Torah Sheba'al Peh. He then speaks about the laws of Avel, mourners. Why did he put Avel, the laws of mourning, into the laws of Shoftim? Why? The answer is because in the framework of Shoftim there is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And mourning is our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the hardest time. You recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Shofet. Mi yichyeh, mi yomus. And what do we say after that? Vatahu el chai v'kayom. You are everlasting. So therefore, Avelut has got its conceptual ideas with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as being king. And then finally he goes into the laws of kings which didn't apply in his world. where he speaks about how you appoint a king, how you go out. No. How you go out to war, the laws of war. Then he goes into the laws of Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, what it means, our relationship to our non-Jewish people. And within that he creates his ideas of Eretz Yisrael, because that's got to do with being in Eretz Yisrael under a king. And therefore, what does he say here? Now, that's the way the Rambam categorized halacha, and he recreated halacha. It's something which we don't even begin to realize. Learning Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, etc., and recreating halacha, and from there the Tur broke down halacha into 4 parts, what we know as the Shulchan Aruch. So therefore, that is the recategorization of halacha, Jewish law. And what does he say about Eretz Yisrael? He says, Gdolei Chachamim, line number 5, Gdolei Chachamim hayu menashkim al tchumei Eretz Yisrael. Used to kiss the borders of Eretz Yisrael. Umenashkim avaneha, and they used to kiss its stones. Umitgalgalim al afara, and roll over its dust, the earth, the connection to Eretz Yisrael. V'cheinu omer ki ratzu avadecha et avaneha. They wanted, your servants wanted, the avanim, the stones, the et afara, and its dust and its soil, yichoneneu. That, guys, is how the Rambam wants us to feel regarding Eretz Yisrael. Now, when he says Gdolei Chachamim, means to say the greatest of people behave like that. That was there, and he speaks very, very often about the relationships of great people in relationship to Eretz Yisrael. Now, why is that? Now, let me give you another example which is quite amazing. Next week, Shiva Sober Tammuz, 3 weeks' time, Tisha B'Av. One of the things which the Rambam speaks about, the laws of Tisha B'Av, is how Gdolei Chachamim related to Tisha B'Av. Now, why is it so hard? Why does he use these terminologies? Because when you're speaking about 1135, when the Rambam lived, what did he see in Eretz Yisrael? He got to Eretz Yisrael after they were expelled. Him and his father were expelled from Spain. They go to Eretz Yisrael, and what do they see there? Crusades. They see Ottoman Empire, the Sultan. They see the battles which are taking place over Eretz Yisrael. So the vision of Eretz Yisrael is so far. The Beis HaBchirot, the laws, how you relate to Tisha B'Av, what does it mean? Is so far from people. Okay, it's not like our generation where we feel Eretz Yisrael 24/7. Okay, in the Rambam's period, it was something which was so far. The concept of Churban Bayis was so far, and the concept of Eretz Yisrael was so far, and therefore he has to recreate people's connection to Eretz Yisrael, and that's why he used Gedolei Chachamim, because the vast majority of people didn't relate to it in that way. Now, what does that mean? It means a new concept, what we called Chibat Eretz Yisrael, the love of Eretz Yisrael. Now, the Ramban, in his commentary on Masechet Gittin, he says the following. He says, Hada Amar, what the Gemara says, and this is the source of the Rambam, Rabbi Abba Menashe Kipi de Akko, they used to kiss the borders of Akko. Now, Akko was the border of Eretz Yisrael in his period. Anybody who goes to Akko knows the fortress, etc., etc., and all what goes on in Akko is one of the earliest places where the Jews lived in Eretz Yisrael. And the Ramban, actually, when he comes to Eretz Yisrael, he goes and lives in Akko at the beginning. That is the port of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, you can imagine to yourself, if you've been to Akko, you see the bay there and how the ships can go in. And the Ramban gives a very, very famous drasha in Akko on Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, the entrance to Eretz Yisrael was through Akko. There were 2 ports, one of Yafo, which we know from Sefer Yonah, and Akko is the one in the time of Chazal. And why does he kiss it? He says, Ve'inami svirelu lo kicha latid lavo, even though there's no specific halacha regarding Trumot and Masrot, chaviva alayhu, they loved it. Da'ika da'ama kedusha shlishit yesh lahem, va'af al pi ken, Eretz Yisrael, and this is the most important statement, Eretz Yisrael b'chibata hi omedet. The mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael exists whether there is kedusha or there's not kedusha. Whether you keep Trumot u'Masrot, or whether there's no kedusha Trumot u'Masrot. Why? Uvikdushata li'inyan yeshivata v'dirata. Now, to give ourselves an example, one of the things which we know in halacha was that certain parts of Eretz Yisrael, let's take Beersheba. Beersheba is outside the borders of Eretz Yisrael as far as Trumot u'Masrot is concerned. That means anything which grows south of Beersheba, or even according to certain opinions, south of Kiryat Gat, okay, you don't actually need to take Trumot u'Masrot. Therefore, during Shemitah, there's no problem of vegetables which grow south, definitely south of Beersheba. Some people even say south of Kiryat Gat. Or you take the Golan. The Golan and all the area north of Akko, according to certain opinions, don't have the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael regarding Trumot u'Masrot and Shvi'is. Now, people who live in Beersheba, do they keep the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael?
Okay.
So
Yes or no?
Well, is there a mitzvah?
What is the foundations? And that's what the Ramban's trying to teach us. The Ramban says, even though there's no Kedusha, as far as the mitzvahs are concerned, you still keep the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. Because Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael, doesn't go according to the Kedusha, the sanctity which was given in the time of Ezra, but the Kedusha which was given at the time of Avraham Avinu. And now we're going to learn that. Why? He says the following, line number 25. V'chol Eretz Yisrael, all of Eretz Yisrael, shehichziku ba olei Mitzrayim, where the people who came out of Mitzrayim went and dwelt there. That is all part of Eretz Yisrael regarding the mitzvah of smicha. What's the mitzvah of smicha? The mitzvah of smicha is at the time of Chazal. One Rav used to give smicha, not like we get the little pieces of paper nowadays, but that was proper smicha, okay, which you're allowed to pasken in many, many different spheres, which nowadays we don't have, a lot of people. But there the smicha was that you're allowed to be a member of the Sanhedrin. Now let's say Rabbi Akiva or other people, okay, who lived outside the area of Kedushat Olei Bavel. That means north of Israel, south of Israel. Could they receive smicha? The Rambam says yes. Why? Says the Radvaz, one of the great commentators, in line number 29. V'chol Eretz Yisrael, af al pi shelo hechziku ba olei Bavel, af al gav, even though de'eina ke'eretz Yisrael li'inyan Trumot u'Masrot, u'liktzat dvarim, li'inyan minui smuchim, as far as appointing Rabbonim, Hakol Eretz Yisrael, v'chein li'inyan hadar be'eretz Yisrael, person who lives in Eretz Yisrael, u'li'inyan hanikvar ba, somebody who's buried in Eretz Yisrael, person's buried south of Beersheba, a person's bones are brought, buried in the Golan. Is it considered that you're buried in Eretz Yisrael? Says the Radvaz, yeah, because it's got nothing to do with the Kedusha. Why? Uleshar Kedushat Eretz Yisrael dinam shaveh. So therefore, Eretz Yisrael has got two different concepts. One is sanctity of the land, the soil. Two things. Trumas and Maasros, Shemitah, is the Kedusha of the soil of Eretz Yisrael. Then you have not the Kedusha of the soil of Eretz Yisrael, you have the Kedusha of what is known as the metaphysical concept of the land of Israel. And the metaphysical, what is the state, not the land? What is the country, not the soil? Two concepts. You have the Kedusha of the soil of Eretz Yisrael, which relates to mitzvot atzliot ba'aretz. And then you have the Kedusha of the land itself. What are the borders of the land of Israel? And the Kedusha of the land of Israel is far greater and bigger than the Kedusha of the area of the soil. Because the Kedusha of the soil only goes where the Jewish people lived in the second time of the second temple. The Kedusha of Eretz Israel in its maximum is what more or less we know as Eretz Israel nowadays. From the Golan till Eilat. That is now. Why is that? Now there's a fascinating concept of Rav Soloveitchik on this subject. And he says the following. He says, V'nire letaretz, line number 35. Din Kiddush HaChodesh. The sanctity when we do Kiddush HaChodesh. Be'eretz Yisrael, because Kiddush HaChodesh has to be done in Eretz Yisrael, is not talui b'kedushat haaretz. Is not dependent on the sanctity of the land itself. Ela talui b'shem Eretz Yisrael. But the name of the land. Not the soil, but the country, the state. The Kiddush HaChodesh, doing Kiddush HaChodesh, the Ibul Shana, and when you do add on an extra month, Tzrichim shiyu be'eretz Yisrael. Va'af al pi, even though shebatla Kedushat haaretz, even though the sanctity of the land, the soil has gone away, Mikol Makom, Adai nibai Kiddush HaChodesh, the Ibul Shana be'eretz Yisrael. The Shem Eretz Yisrael lo batla. The name of Eretz Yisrael never goes away. When we daven towards Eretz Yisrael, it's got nothing to do with whether you keep Trumas and Maasros on it. It's got nothing to do with it. Trumot and Maasrot are a function of the soil, but it's not a function of the country. And since it's not a function of the soil, but a function of the country, all the mitzvot which we need Eretz Yisrael for are what? Are part and parcel. And now this becomes a foundation in the conceptual idea of the Rambam. Two concepts. One is land, soil, and the other one is what is known as Eretz Yisrael. Now we're going to see something which is quite fascinating. One of the biggest problems which faced the Rambam was the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. How to sanctify the new moon. Now, how do we sanctify the new moon nowadays? We don't do Birchas HaChodesh. Okay? It's because we've got a calendar. And who made this calendar? Hillel Hasheni. Hillel, the great-great-grandson of Hillel Hazaken. In approximately 200, year 200, and that's when the calendar was created. Okay, because from then onwards, they didn't have a Sanhedrin. The Jewish people had left Eretz Israel. And therefore he created a calendar. Now, but this calendar is fixed. There's certain rules to it. Okay, anybody who wants to learn it has to learn the Hilchot Kiddush HaChodesh of the Rambam, or at the end of Hilchot Rosh Chodesh on the Tur is the code of the calendar. So when you buy a calendar at the beginning of a year, Rosh Hashanah, you will see all different, what is this year? For instance, is it going to be a leap year? Number one, is it a leap year or not? 12-month Adar Bet or not? How many days are there going to be Rosh Chodesh? Now, usually you have Elul is 2 days, Tishri is 1 day. Mar Cheshvan, Kislev are the problems. Okay? How many days is Rosh Chodesh Kislev? And how many days are Chodesh Tevet? The rest of them go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Sometimes Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan will be Rosh Chodesh Kislev will be 2 days because Mar Cheshvan needs 30 days. And sometimes also Chodesh Tevet needs 2 days Rosh Chodesh, because Kislev needs it. So therefore, sometimes you will notice on the calendar, every year, you check when the last day Chanukah is. Chanukah always begins when? Chafei Kislev. The question is, when does it end? Sometimes it will end Bet Tevet, and sometimes it will end Gimel Tevet, because it all depends how many days Rosh Chodesh it was. Now, anybody who looks in a calendar, we haven't got one here, you will notice a whole lot of abbreviations. And these abbreviations give you the code of this year. Now, what's it dependent on? Number one, it's dependent on Yom Kippur can never fall on Friday or a Sunday. Why can't it fall on a Friday or Sunday? Because it means fasting. You can't cook 2 days running. Shabbos you can't cook, and Yom Kippur you can't cook. That Chazal never allowed. That's why Yom Tov you can cook. You can cook through Eruv Tavshilin from Shabbos to Yom Tov. In the days when there are no fridges, what do? You can't do Melacha on Shabbos, you can't do Melacha on Yom Kippur. So one of the things which they did was, Yom Kippur could never ever fall on Sunday or Friday. Hoshana Rabbah, 1 minute, Hoshana Rabbah will never ever fall on a Shabbos. Okay, and there's certain rules, and that's why we have the rule, Lo Adu Rosh. Rosh Hashanah first day of Rosh Hashanah can never fall on a Sunday, Wednesday or Friday, and Lo Badu Pesach. And Pesach can never fall on, first day Pesach can never be on a Sunday night, Tuesday night, or Friday, or Thursday night. Okay? Because otherwise you're going to have a mess up during the year. So therefore, in order that you follow these rules of Lo Adu Rosh, Lo Badu Pesach, you have to work out what's going to happen. Yes, what do you want to ask?
When they did Kiddush HaChodesh, when the time of the Sanhedrin,
yes.
What happened with these issues of Yom Kippur, etc.?
Very good question. And the answer is, they also used these principles. They used to push it off. They used to tell the Eidim, don't come, because then we're going to have trouble. No, you couldn't. Those were the rules which the Chachamim created. And that's why, when it says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem. Lachem. To you. You also decide when it's Rosh Chodesh. Okay? Now, let's give ourselves one more concept, according to that. According to Rabbeinu Hananel, Rabbeinu Bechai brings it, there was never ever a mitzvah of sanctifying the moon by seeing it. What was the most important thing is the calculations. And all what seeing it did was to prove that was Rosh Chodesh. But it really wasn't. The main thing is calculations. According to other opinions, also, it was a mixture of both together. Okay? Now, any questions until now? It's a complicated issue, and one of the greatest miracles, guys, is that Jews all over the world kept the same calendar. And in the year 850, approximately, no, a bit before that, there was a machloket which took place between Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon and Rabbeinu Aharon HaGaon of Yerushalayim regarding whether that specific year was going to be, when was Rosh Hashanah going to be. It was the only machloket, recorded machloket, which ever took place regarding the calendar. Since then, there was no machloket ever recorded. Everybody accepted the same calendar, whether the Jews in Taiman, the Jews in Morocco, the Jews in Poland. And remember, there were no WhatsApp, guys. Think to yourselves, no WhatsApps. No, what's it called? No emails.
Patrons.
Okay. It's a long way to fly from Yemen to what's it called? Okay, but everybody kept the same calendar. There's never been a machloket. Yes, what do you want to ask? Yeah.
That begs the question, how in those days did they get their information all around?
Because there was
I
the...
can tell you right now, when I get a letter from New York to here, it takes 30 days.
Right.
That's fast. That's fast.
Because they all knew the code. All the great Rabbonim knew the code of Hillel. They all knew the codes.
Which was?
You want me to explain it? It's complicated. You need a board for it and you need everything. Okay? There's a set calculation of cycle of 90 years. It's complicated. Believe me, it's complicated.
We'll take your word for it.
Yeah, take my word for it. Okay, please.
No, that makes it more interesting that all over the world, when they didn't even have connection with
Exactly, yet they all kept the same code.
Right,
That's the miracle, and only one recorded machloket. Only one recorded machloket.
So why is there difference in the government?
Pardon?
We should have one sitter for all the Jews too.
No, because I'll explain to you. Okay? If you look at the differences of tefillah, nobody argued that there's Psukei de Zimra, the Birchas HaShachar, Korbanos, Psukei de Zimra, Birchas Kriyat Shema, Shmona Esrei, Tachnun, Ubolotzion, Oleinu, Nisan Yah. Agreed? No machlokas. You can go into a Taimani shul, you might not understand the accent, but you will follow the Siddur because it got the same components.
But
Different emphasis.
in order.
An order,
Yeah.
but not big orders.
No.
No, okay.
Kedusha.
Okay, they added on here, Naritzcho and Akdishcho, we say Nekadesh Shimcha, big deal. Okay? There's no, it's not an issue. Everybody had different ways of expressing themselves.
Yeah.
Okay?
And they were permitted.
And they were permitted. Nobody started, they didn't
That's
have to
why
worry.
the shuls are all confused.
Exactly. Okay. Right. Okay. But I'm saying there were small things. Okay, they're not big
That's
things.
true.
Right. So therefore, nobody ever argued when Shabbos is going to be. Okay. That means, and the calendar was always the same. Yeah.
406.
Wasn't there in Second Brachos? Wasn't there a Rabbi Yeshua? I think that was it.
No.
That
That was
also had-
because
Yeah.
of the calculation. Exactly.
Right.
In the period of the Tanoim between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua, there was a machloket. Okay, that's a recorded machloket. Okay, but that was in the time when they did Kiddush al pi ha're'iyah. Okay, where there actually was a machloket, what are the conditions of seeing or not seeing, etc., etc., and also the calculations. Okay, tying the calculations together with re'iyah. Okay, that was the problem. Okay, but that's one recorded machloket. The other one later on, in approximately 800, Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon and the Gaon of Yerushalayim, which was a political argument also. Okay, who is the supremacy of the Gaonim, Bavel or Eretz Yisrael? But we won't go into that because it's a very interesting machloket. Okay, but I'm not going to teach you Kiddush HaChodesh. Last question on Kiddush HaChodesh you wanted
I was
after.
going to say what he asked.
Right, okay, let's go stage one. Next one. Well, one of the Chidushim, the great Chidushim of the Rambam is the following. He says, you've got a mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. Kiddush HaChodesh has got to be in Eretz Yisrael. Now, if there are no Jews in Eretz Yisrael, as he more or less saw, what's going to be? Who's going to do Kiddush HaChodesh in Eretz Yisrael? Now, the Rambam believed that there has to be people living in Eretz Yisrael in order to do Kiddush HaChodesh. So let's read this fascinating concept, because this will be the connection between the Jewish people and Eretz Yisrael. Mitzvah Kuf Nun Gimel. The mitzvah of 153, line number 50. Hu shetzivanu yitbarach v'kadesh chodoshim. The mitzvah is to do Kiddush HaChodesh ulechashev chodoshim v'shanim, and to work them out. Okay, Kiddush HaChodesh, and work out the years, whether it's a leap year or not a leap year, whether this year's a Shemitah or not Shemitah, etc., etc., etc. V'zohi mitzvat Kiddush HaChodesh. Aval mitzvah zu, line number 51, mitzvah zu, lo ya'aseh otam le'olam, zulat bet din hagadol levad, uve'eretz Yisrael levad. It can only be done in Eretz Yisrael, but the Beis Din HaGadol. V'lachen, Batla hariya etzleinu. Nowadays, there's no such thing as doing Kiddush HaChodesh and looking up at the new moon on the Rosh Chodesh and saying, I've seen the new moon. Big deal, so you saw it. Doesn't mean anything. Why? Beheder Bet Din HaGadol. Because we don't have a Bet Din HaGadol. K'mo shebatla hakravat korbanot beheder HaMikdash. Right? You haven't got a Beis HaMikdash, we can't do Kiddush HaChodesh properly. But, V'da, says the Rambam, שהחשבון הזה, the חשבון, the calculations, שנמנה אותו היום, which we do nowadays, ונדע בו, and will know, ראשי חודשים והמועדים, אי אפשר לעשותו, אלא בארץ ישראל בלבד. You can only do in Eretz Yisrael. Hillel, who did the calendar, lived in Eretz Yisrael. Now, the fact that Hillel carries what's it called? How is it that during 2,000 years, says the Rambam, there has to be somebody in Eretz Yisrael to carry on this Kiddush HaChodesh, says the Rambam. אי אפשר לעשותו אלא בית ישראל בלבד, אלא בעת הצורך ובהיעדר חכמים בארץ ישראל, and with the lack of חכמים בארץ ישראל, אז אפשר לבית דין הסמוך בארץ ישראל שיעבור שנים ויקבע חודשים בחוץ לארץ, כמו שעשה רבי עקיבא. Okay? Now, so therefore, you either got to have Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, or you've got to have somebody who had smicha in Eretz Yisrael, who is allowed to go out of Eretz Yisrael to do Kiddush HaChodesh there. But you always got to have this connection to Eretz Yisrael. Either people living here, or somebody who had smicha in Eretz Yisrael, and he can do Kiddush HaChodesh outside Eretz Yisrael. And now the Rambam says, line number 59, Uvekan shoresh gadol, mu'od. This is one of the great principles. Mishoshei ha'emunah, the foundations of emunah. Lo yida'ehu v'lo yitbonen makomo ela mi sheda'ato amuka. What I'm going to tell you now is one of the foundations which many people don't even know and not aware of it. And what is it? V'zeh sheheyotenu hayom b'chutz la'aretz. The fact that we live in chutz la'aretz, monim b'mlechet ha'ibur shebiadenu, v'omrim, and we say, here in Egypt, here in America, shezeh hayom Rosh Chodesh, today's Rosh Chodesh, וזה היום יום טוב, לא מפני חשבוננו נקבעו יום טוב בשום פנים. It's not because we know it. Here in Yemen, here in Canada, here in England. No, it's nothing to do with us. אלא מפני שבית דין הגדול שבארץ ישראל כבר קבעו זה היום ראש חודש. It's because what happened in the past. And אוסיף לך ביור, says the Rambam, אילו אפשר דרך משל שבני ארץ ישראל יעדרו מארץ ישראל, if חס וחלילה during the history of the Jewish people there'll be 2 years where not one Jew will live in Eretz Israel, what would happen? חלילה לקל מעשות זאת, כי הוא הבטיח שלא יימחה אותות האומה מכל מקום, because he promised us that what? There will always be Jews living in Eretz Israel. ולא יהיה שם בית דין, ולא יהיה בחוץ לארץ בית דין שנסמך בארץ, הנה חשבוננו זה לא יועילנו כלום. If there is no representation of the Jewish people in Eretz Israel, then our keeping Rosh Chodesh and our keeping Yom Tov doesn't exist. It stops. 1 minute. It stops. The whole reason why we can know it's Rosh Chodesh and we can accept it's Rosh Chodesh is because the Jewish people carry on the tradition which was in Eretz Israel through Hillel, and there is a continuous representation of Am Yisrael in Eretz Israel. And says the Rambam, if chas v'chalila, for a few years, there won't be 10 people living in Eretz Yisrael, there's no Kiddush HaChodesh. There has to be a representation of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael to carry on Kiddush HaChodesh.
Have another mitzvah.
1 minute. What?
Other mitzvah.
No, it's the only mitzvah. The only mitzvah which needs Jews in Eretz Yisrael for the calendar, our calendar, is based on the fact that there were always Jews, according to the Rambam, in Eretz Yisrael. And if, says the Rambam, there will be a period in history which, chas v'chalila, there won't be 10 Jews in Eretz Yisrael, we're finished. And he says, why? Ki ein lanu, hine cheshbonenu, line number 65, guys. Hine cheshbonenu ze lo yoilenu as klum b'shum panim. Our cheshbon won't have any impact. Why? Because the cheshbon is done by the people in Eretz Yisrael. The first cheshbon was done by Hillel. Hillel and the Jews afterwards continue this cheshbon, and they keep this cheshbon. And that is the impact of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, having a ripple effect on the whole of the Jewish people throughout history. And if chas v'chalila, says the Rambam, there won't be any Jews living in Eretz Yisrael, finished. The calendar does not exist. Let me just finish off the line. Lefi she'ein lanu, we don't have any permission, line number 65. Ein lanu reshut, shenechashet b'chutz la'aretz, v'neka'aber shanim v'nikva chodoshim, ela bitnaim, we haven't got any permission to calculate years, months, etc., etc. Ki mitzion teitei Torah, udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. There has to be Torah coming out from Tzion. Ki mitzion teitei Torah. Only from Eretz Yisrael comes out Torah, udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. Uksheyitbonen mi sheyesh lo sechel shalem. And when a person who's got seichel will learn properly, b'kavanah zot, yitba'er lo kol ma she'amarnu biur en safek bo. And anybody who hasn't got seichel doesn't know what we're talking about. Okay, and the Rambam is so convinced in this theory. Now, he's actually prophesying.
Is that his theory?
Yes, that's his theory. That's what he says.
Only.
What?
What's he based it on?
Because he claims that Kiddush HaChodesh, okay, you want to, let's just carry on one line and then you can have all the questions. 1 minute, let me just carry on with the Rambam. Says the Rambam, line number 70. אין מחשבים וקובעים חודשים ועברים שנים אלא בארץ ישראל שנאמר כי בציון תצא תורה דבר השם ירושלים. ואם היה אדם גדול, if there was a great man בחוכמה ונשמח בארץ ישראל ויצא לחוץ לארץ ולא הניח בארץ כמותו, then you can do it. Okay? But there always has to be a connection to Eretz Yisrael. Questions and then we'll carry on. What is this thesis? Yes?
Yeah, but wasn't the mitzvah of Chodesh outside of Eretz Yisrael? It was the first mitzvah. So they just came
Correct.
Correct.
Once it came into Eretz Yisrael, then Eretz Yisrael took over the monopoly. The only one which could be done was until they got into Eretz Yisrael, and then they did it in the Midbar. But the minute Am Yisrael went into Eretz Yisrael, then that changed. Okay? Now, the biggest problem was, what happened during the 70 years exile of the Jewish people? The answer was, because all the people, they still had Nevi'im who were connected to Eretz Yisrael, Yecheskel, Zechariah, Malachi, etc., etc. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. But those were the 70 years where we know Jews weren't in there. But according to the Rambam, from the time of Churban Bayit, time of the destruction of the Second Temple, there will always be Jews, there will always a certain representation of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. What did you want to ask?
No, you just answered it about the 70 years.
Right, okay.
It was smuchim
Because Smuchim, yes, exactly. Yes.
This may be carrying the argument too far, but if there's such a dependency on Israel in setting a calendar, why is it that we have 2 days of Chag outside of Israel? I mean, it should be dependent on what happens.
No, because even then, the people in Chutz La'aretz didn't know when it took place. They didn't have a WhatsApp. They didn't know when Rosh Chodesh actually took place. Think to yourselves, okay, they went to the Beis HaMikdash, the Eidim, the witnesses came to the Beis HaMikdash, we testify it, how's that going to get to Chutz La'aretz? So therefore, what?
The same way earlier on in the class when you said about that they declared something and people in Yemen found
No, because then we already did the Cheshbon.
I thought it was a string of bonfires or something.
That was, of course they were, but it took time. And when the Goyim started mixing up the fires, what did they do then? Right. Okay. So therefore, that is the concept of this 2 days Yom Tov. Because Sveika to Yoma. Now, on what is this based? And here we come to the final conceptual idea of the Rambam, which is perhaps the most fascinating. The Rambam goes over this in many different places because he was aware of the conceptual idea which he was developing. Okay, it's something which is mind-boggling, the connection between the Jewish people and Eretz Yisrael, and this bond that the three things which the Mizrochnikim like to say, Torah Yisrael, Al Pi Eretz Yisrael, okay, is a halachic concept. It's not something which you can break down because mitzvahs are now dependent on Eretz Yisrael and people living in Eretz Yisrael. The minute you say Ki mitzion tzeitzei Torah udvar Hashem Yerushalayim, what does it actually mean? That Kiddush HaChodesh is an example of mitzvahs where the three conceptual ideas of Torah, Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael come together. It's not just an ideal, according to the Rambam. It's halachic. It's a halachic concept, and you can't keep the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh without these three concepts. Okay, you can have Eretz Yisrael, and you can have Am Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz, but the whole calendar, according to the Rambam, will break down if what? If you don't have Jewish people living in Eretz Yisrael. Why is that? Now the Rambam, one minute. The Rambam has to base it on something. The Rambam says the following.
Where are you?
Line number 77. And this, guys, is in his first books, which the Rambam wrote. Okay? The first sefer which the Rambam wrote was his commentary on the Mishnah. It took him 10 years. Okay, he started it when he was 18 years old, finished it when he was about 27. Okay? First person who wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, because he wanted people to learn Mishnah, because he believed Mishnah was the basis, the basic text. So therefore he wrote the commentary. And after he wrote the commentary on the Mishnah, he began his Mishneh Torah. But he realizes that I can't teach halacha without knowing all the mitzvahs. So therefore what does he do? He writes Sefer HaMitzvahs. And only then does he write Mishneh Torah. And only after that does he write more Nebuchim. That means, and therefore you see that at the beginning of his life he already created these concepts. And what is this concept?
Foundation.
Line number 77. Perush HaMishnah in Masechet Bechorot. Kvar biyanu b'tchilat Sanhedrin, she'ein nikra bezdin bistam. What is a Jewish court? A law court? A law court is only if what? If you had samuch be'eretz Yisrael. If you had somebody who got smicha in Eretz Yisrael. Smicha had to take place in Eretz Yisrael. Once Am Yisrael entered Eretz Yisrael, smicha will only be in Eretz Yisrael. Right. Bein shaya samuch, mipi samuch.
Who gave smicha?
Moshe Rabbeinu gave to Yoshua. Yoshua went to Eretz Yisrael, gave smicha to the generations afterwards, to Pinchas. You want to know the whole lot? There are 40 generations, but smicha stopped in the time of the Romans, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bova, and after that, okay, then what do we have? We have a sort of representation of smicha. Okay? But the Rambam says, O ba'askamat b'nei Eretz Yisrael lemanoto rosh yeshiva. Lefi. Now comes the words, guys. Lefi. Sheb'nei Eretz Yisrael heim asher nikrahim kahal. Kahal, the congregation of the Jewish people, is only a kahal of those who live in Eretz Yisrael. All the rest, guys, we're tangents. Jews in England, Jews in Yemen, they're all tangents.
New York.
They're all tangents of what? Of the Kehillah of Am Yisrael, which is in Eretz Yisrael.
The Rambam did
V'Hashem kra'am kol hakahal. They are the kahal. Va'afilu hayu asara achadim. Even though there are a few tens of people there. Ve'en chosheshim. And you don't have to worry about those who live in Chutz La'aretz. Ve'en chosheshim lemishe zulatam b'Chutz La'aretz k'mo shebiarnu b'horayot. Don't worry about the Jews in Chutz La'aretz. They're not part of the kahal. The kahal of the Jewish people are the ones in Eretz Yisrael.
Rambam wasn't there all.
What?
Rambam did.
Correct! Whether he could be there or not doesn't make any difference.
Well, I think it's an amazing statement for a guy who wasn't there all the
Who couldn't be there.
I know.
He couldn't be there.
Chas v'shalom.
No, I'm just saying
Blame the
he
Rambam.
couldn't. He couldn't be there.
Yeah.
Okay? For all different reasons. But he on the other side, he realized that those who lived in Eretz Yisrael in his period are the true representation of the Jewish people.
And call the shots.
Pardon?
And
call the shots. So here we see the Rambam and vis-a-vis Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam believes that the Jewish people's homeland and their whole existence and halachic existence and metaphysical existence can only be in Eretz Yisrael. Because otherwise you break down the what? The fabric of the Jewish people. Now, when did all this begin? Why is a kahal only considered those in Eretz Yisrael? And now we're going to learn a fascinating, and we're going to end off with a fascinating Maharal. The Maharal says the following. It's in line number 84. 84. The Maharal speaks about the laws of tzedakah. Okay, it's called, the Maharal wrote a fascinating book of Jewish ethics, which he called Netivot Olam. Okay, it's a magnificent work. Okay, I love teaching it. And but here he talks about tzedakah, and the antithesis of tzedakah, guys, is Shiloh, ribis. Ribis is the antithesis of tzedakah. Now, regarding ribis, there is a pasuk. Taking interest. Sharkers. Okay, loan sharks. Shiloh. Okay? And one of the things which the Maharal speaks about is this pasuk, which he writes about it in the Tzivat Tzedakah, because it's the actual antithesis of tzedakah. Ulekach amra, Torah, and the Torah writes in line number 84, Et kaspecha lo titein lo b'neshech. You're not allowed to give your money with interest. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I'm the Lord your God. Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, we took you out of Egypt. Lateit lachem et Eretz Canaan, to give you Eretz Yisrael. Liot lachem le'elokim. Says the Maharal, what's the connection between ribis and taking you out of Egypt and bringing you to Eretz Canaan? What? Why is this so specific regarding interest? Why does the Torah? Now you take many mitzvahs. The Torah never connected it up in such a way of HaKadosh Baruch Hu taking you out of Egypt and bringing you to Eretz Canaan. Says the Maharal, Uma inyan ze lekan, she'amar latet lachem et Eretz Canaan, liot lachem lelokim. Avla perush nir'eh, line number 86. Ki ka'asher nichnesu Yisrael la'aretz. Hayu Yisrael am echad legamrei. A country unites a people. You only become one nation if you live in one place. Now, the foundation of the Jewish people is twofold. People and religion. The foundation of the Jewish people is Am Yisrael and Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What does Ruth say? Amech, Ami, Elokayich, Elokai. We are one people, and we've got one God. But it's not. One without the other does not exist. It can't exist. And that's what is different than any other religion in the world. Any other religion in the world, you can be an American Christian, you can be a Zambian Christian, same thing with any religion in the world. The only religion which demands nationality is the Jewish people. Nation and religion. In the nation, the identity of a nation is based on what? Country, place. פירוש נראה כי כאשר נכנסו ישראל לארץ ישראל היו ישראל עם אחד לגמרי. Only then they became a nation. When they were in the desert, they were tribes. When they go into Eretz Israel, what happens? They become a nation. What is the proof? וראיה לזה שהרי כל זמן שישראל לא עברו את הירדן, as long as the Jewish people hadn't crossed the river Jordan, ולא באו לארץ, and they didn't come into Eretz Israel, לא נענשו על הנסתרות. They were never punished on averot which were done in a private home. Why? עד שעברו ונעשו ערבים זה בעד זה. כל ישראל ערבים זה לזה. Responsibility. My actions have an impact on a national scale is only when you went into Eretz Israel. Where was the first ramification of Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Lazeh? Very good. Who said it? Achan. Achan takes the spoil of Yericho. He puts it in his tent. In the battle of Ai, 36 soldiers are killed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises Yoshua, nobody's going to be killed. What happens? The Aveira of Achan, which is done on a private scale, has an impact on the nation. Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Lazeh means to say, my action has an impact on the whole nation. When are we a whole nation? When we go into Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael binds together the Jewish people. Hare, shelo nasu arevim ze ba'ad ze, ki nikra arev. Why am I called arev? Mu'urav. We're all mixed together. When are we mixed together? We mix together when we have one land. The melting pot of the Jewish nation takes place where? In one land. When you're in Golos, this doesn't apply. The melting pot is not there. Responsibility, national responsibility, economic responsibility, psychological responsibility, everything. ולא נעשו מחוברים להיות עם אחד לגמרי עד שבאו לארץ ישראל. ועל ידי, line number 90, ועל ידי ארץ ישראל הם עם אחד לגמרי. Says the Maharal, tzedakah is a mitzvah on a national scale. Okay? Why do I have to give tzedakah? I'm responsible for you. What is the antidote of tzedakah? Ribis. When do you feel you're one nation? When do you feel the real bite? When you're in this land together, and when the ribis goes in, the interest. And the Maharal says that this concept of ribis, where you actually feel responsibility for one another, and here, by taking ribis, you don't feel that responsibility. You want to what? What do you want to do? You want to use the other guy's money. You want to take from him. That, guys, takes place in Eretz Yisrael. Because Eretz Yisrael is the place of the melting pot of the Jewish people. And only in Eretz Yisrael, you are a kahal. You're one unified community. And this becomes the foundation of the conceptual idea which was developed by Rabbi Yehuda Levi and Rav Kook, etc., etc. This foundation of the Rambam, of Kimitzion, mitzvahs, Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, begins with the world of the Rambam. And this world of the Rambam is so unique. Okay, they argued with the Rambam, but what we're trying to say is that the conceptual idea of kahal, what is the kahal of the Jewish people? Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Because the unified force of a nation can only take place in Eretz Yisrael. And the Rambam says, if chas v'chalila, it will take place that there will no be Jews in Eretz Yisrael, then what do we become? We become a shtibel. And we're not a kahal. And that, guys, is the essence of the Mishnah of the Rambam. How Eretz Yisrael is a function of the triangle of the existence of the Jewish people, and the three pillars can only be stuck together when they are together. Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Am Yisrael. And therefore it's not just what's it called? A slogan. It's not a slogan, according to the Rambam. This is the emes, the truth of Torah. The truth of Torah is the three together. And the minute one of the sides falls, then everything falls. Everything. Because just think to yourself, what creates the unity of the Jewish people is language and calendar. Calendar. That's what creates the unity of the Jewish people. We all have the same chagim. We all know when the same chagim. We all speak same language, because language, calendar, and land, etc., are the foundations of a nation. Yeah.
2 weeks ago when we read about Korah, that was a unique event because they hadn't yet entered Eretz Yisrael.
Correct. But there, the reason of Korach was exactly that. Because according to the Rambam, the foundation of the faith of Moshe Rabbeinu is in Parshat Korach. That's where we learn the fundamental faith in that Moshe Rabbeinu was Moshe Emes v'Torah Emes. And what do we say? What's the last pasuk? Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Nachon, we need to believe that this is the Torah of Moshe. But as I learned with my grandchildren last night, Moshe Rabbeinu still sinned. Still sinned. And he was punished.
I should get punished by Moshe.
Punished. Okay? That is not making Moshe Rabbeinu into a leader of a cult. A cult leader can never ever fail you. Moshe Rabbeinu failed the Jewish people in his lifetime. And that's why, on the one hand, we don't know his burial place, but on the other hand, he was what? Human, just like us. Yes?
Why didn't Hillel, like, set the calendar, also make only one day up there instead of 2 days? Why didn't he change it?
No!
It's the punishment for
No. He's got nothing to do. His calendar had nothing. It's only when does Yom Tov begin. But the
We also said when Rosh Chodesh is.
Pardon?
When Rosh Chodesh was. Everybody knew when Rosh Chodesh was.
So the Rambam, because the takona of what's it called was of that the Chachomim before that was to keep 2 days in the time of the Tanoim, in time of the Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah, right.
And that the Rambam says, okay, that became, even though the reason is batel, the takona still remained, and that is a big subject on its own. Why? Okay, guys, call to. Huh? I don't know when I'm giving the next one. I don't know.